Rivermen Day is rolling on now, and we're bringing in a very special part of the Rivermen's 40-year hockey franchise history of professional hockey in Peoria. He is a 2017 Peoria Rivermen Hall of Fame inductee, of course, a Kelly Cup champion back in 2000, Rivermen defenseman Dan Hodge, and of course, I'm Andrew Mossberg, joined by Dave Aminian at the Peoria Journal-Star, who saw a lot of Hodge playing back in the 90s and early 2000s. Dan, thanks so much for joining us on Rivermen Day. How's everything going?
Oh, it's going great. Thanks for having me. Enjoy anytime I get a chance to talk about the Rivermen days. I'm glad to do it. It was such a special time in my life and such a lot of good memories there. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
We're going to dive in deep to the Rivermen, but first let's just get an idea. Where are you calling from? What's going on in your life right now?
Well, I currently live in Scarborough, Maine, with my wife and our three kids. I have a daughter who's almost 9, and a son who's almost 7, and a son who's almost 5. So I got a big year coming up this year. I run my own hockey schools up here called Hodge Hockey. We do a lot of summer camps, a lot of clinics, and one-on-one stuff. And I'm also currently the co-owner of a team called the Twin City Thunder right here. We play in the NCDC, which is a Tier 2 league that is it's a lot like the North American Hockey League for people out in the Midwest, but we're located in northeastern part of the country, and we go from Maine all the way down to New Jersey. So we got 13 teams in the league and part of the bigger USPHL family.
Hodge, how has the pandemic affected you and your business? And I mean, how are you getting through it?
Well, it's funny. Last summer, I think it was just we do summer clinics, like 5 1-week things. We weren't sure they were going to happen. And, I think all the kids were wearing masks and everyone just kind of so much of the unknown last summer. And, this year, the hockey season started at the end of September. And, we would be playing games and then the games would be canceled. And we'd finally played our 10th game of our junior season on December 13th after starting, the end of August, September. And, actually we just got back from Florida. We were down in Wesley Chapel, Florida, near Tampa, where the USPHL took the 13 NCDC teams down to compete right where the Tampa Bay Juniors play. It's right where the Lightning actually have a practice facility there as well. And so it was a really good, it was 20 plus games in 44 days. So we went from playing basically no hockey games to right at it. So it was quite a grind. The players responded well. I mean, there's a lot of good hockey. And, again, the whole thing with this junior thing is to get kids onto college. So that was the way to get them noticed, is to have them playing. So they were playing a lot of hockey and they were definitely being scouted.
Tough to obviously do all of those things in the midst of a pandemic, but let's rewind way back. We'll wind the clock way back to when you were a kid and COVID was not a thing. The Spanish flu had already flew by long ago. And but talk about you as a kid growing up, because you talk about developing with these kids at the junior level, trying to get them ready for college. Obviously, you had a collegiate career too. But you grew up in a family just bred of professional hockey talent. Your father, Ken, a 2-time Stanley Cup champion, longtime player with the Boston Bruins. You had a couple brothers that also played pro. What was it like growing up in that Hodge house?
I think it's like any other house. Every kid thinks their dad's crazy. I don't know what he's talking about. Hey, he's not talking to me. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Every day, every kid thinks their parents are nuts. I see it now. I see it now with my kids. But yeah, I mean, we played a lot of hockey, and you know what though, we didn't just do hockey. We played baseball. We played lacrosse. A lot of kids I think nowadays are just focused on one sport, and they kind of get burnt out after a while. Yeah. But for us, it was once the hockey season was over, put the stuff in the bag, throw it under the stairs in the basement, and you're on to baseball. And then, after that, it's my older brother played soccer and I played lacrosse, and it just things like that were just, we did different things to keep busy, and play different sports. And I think that helped us out as athletes and as people, just being part of teams and understanding what a team is, and understanding you're not going to win every game. You understand you're going to lose some, you're going to win some, you lose some. And that's just kind of one of the things my dad always said to us is you're not going to win every game. and you just got to compete your hardest and do the best you can, and that's kind of the way we went with it. And we just we played a lot of sports and did a lot of things, and we're growing up, and we had a pool in our backyard. We went swimming a lot and had friends over, and just a lot of good times as a kid.
Hodge, you of course had a good college career and a good family pedigree, and ended up coming to the Rivermen. How did all of that happen for you as your pro career got under?
Well, it's funny. I was at Merrimack College. I got drafted by the Bruins in the 9th round, I believe it was, which is I probably should have seen that writing on the wall that I was ever going to be part of their organization, but you never know, right? So I went to camp with them. I ended up playing in Providence my rookie year. About 23, 24 games in, I was kind of in and out of the lineup, and I ended up tearing my ACL in my left knee. And I'll never forget, Blaine Locker was our goalie at the time, and I was behind the net. I was laying behind the net holding my knee, and they scored a goal, and he turned around and looked at me and goes, "You better be hurt." So, unfortunately, that was the end of my time in the American League and in Boston. And that summer, I ended up actually going to this is a funny story. I actually going to Long Beach's camp in the old IHL. And I got released, and my agent at the time had been talking to Mark Kumpel, who was the coach with Dayton, and Mark Reeds, rest his soul, was the coach with Peoria. And we were talking about it, I think I'm going to go with Dayton. I'm going to go because I know Mark, I know Kumps, he's from Boston, so I just have a better feeling about it. And I had a friend of mine who was playing juniors that's there, Dale Hooper. So I never forget, I was in the hotel in California, and there was no cell phones back then, right? So I ran down to the payphone bank, right? Threw in my coins, called my agent, said, "Yeah, let's do the Dayton thing," and blah, blah, blah. And went back upstairs to my room. He goes, "Yeah, I'll call him, no problem." Went back upstairs, and my phone's ringing. So I answered the phone. It's Mark Reeds. So Mark Reeds goes, "Hey, I just got some bad news from your agent. I really wish you'd reconsider this. And, you come here, you have all this good stuff." And I'm like, "Oh, gee, all right, thanks." So I had the phone, ran back downstairs, got on the phone, called my agent, and I said, "Cancel it. I'm not going to Dayton. I'm going to Peoria. I want to go there, blah, blah, blah." And he goes, "Well, that's good." He goes, "Because the Dayton, it was busy when I tried to call Dayton, so I couldn't get a hold of him." So I'm like, "Oh, okay, perfect. So no harm, no foul kind of thing." So he's like, "Yeah." So, so then I remember I went to Peoria, and I stayed with my good friend, Jim Small. Jim Small was my first roommate in Peoria. And Dougie Evans was in town, and Dougie Evans and I would go ski at Owen Center until camp. So we would go there in the morning and skate for a couple hours, just him and I, just Dougie and I, go out there just wheeling and dealing around and kind of talking about some stuff. But yeah, so it all kind of worked out in a funny way that, I was set on going to Dayton, and next thing you know, I was in Illinois.
So to age you a little bit, I'm a little over a year old when you signed with Peoria, but a lot. Okay. Going back to that time, I think it's still a thing, and I'm asking you a question out of honesty. You talk about how your time ended in Providence. Some players do not receive that very well when they're going from starting out in the AHL, and now you're going down a league. You're going to the ECHL. Do you remember how was your mindset? Because you were, as you mentioned, coming back from an injury. Did you initially say you were gung-ho, whether it was Dayton or Peoria? Was there a little bit of maybe not hesitation, but maybe even frustration? Or how was your mindset at that time?
Well, I kind of I had my knee. My knee wasn't 100%. It was still because when I tore my ACL, Boston was supposed to rehab me, but they never did. So I never got any rehab. So I was kind of on my own rehabbing. So it was like, and then I went to Peoria, and I was funny. I'll never forget the story. I was Greg Eberle, the trainer at the time. He's like, "Okay, we're going to get your legs stronger." So he had me on this little stool, and I'm doing one-legged pulls all the way around the bowels of the Peoria Civic Center. And at the time, I run into Greg Griffith, who at the time was one of the owners. So as the first time I met him, he's like, "Oh, how you doing?" I'm like, "I'm fine," and he just we kind of talked for a few minutes, but I sit there one-legged, pulling it. And then, then Mark, I sat with Mark for a bit, and Mark Reeds, and I said, "Gee," he goes, "How do you feel?" I go, "Well, I feel pretty good." He goes, I'm a little disappointed about, not being in the American League anymore. And he goes, "You can either accept it as a as a challenge or a place you're supposed to be and enjoy it, or you can be miserable. And I'll never forget Mark saying that. And Mark and I, it's well documented, Mark and I didn't have the greatest relationship. We were like oil and water, but I respected the heck out of him. And I wish I had the time to tell him how much I respected him, because he was a big influence on me, and I really appreciated being a player for him.
And then there was the time that the team was so shorthanded going into Cincinnati, Mark Reeds activated himself at age 39 and played.
Was that with us? Or that was the IHL? That wasn't us.
Yeah.
I think. Was it us?
Yeah. No, it was coming in. Yeah, he was the assistant coach. Oh. Scored a goal and promptly fell down and broke his elbow.
Yeah, there you go. That's
there he goes, launching his career in Peoria. But you as you said, you played for Reeds. You also played for Donnie Granado and Jason Christie. Three very different guys. What were those guys like to play for?
Well, Reeder, of course, he came in with the NHL pedigree. As the I think my dad had remembered playing against him when he was in Hartford or something. So he's like, I kind of remember him from Hartford and maybe in the minors a little bit. And so Mark was a really good coach. He's my first coach was Bob Francis, who really, I was hurt. So he kind of really just didn't really pay attention to me in a way. But, Mark was a really, he and Dougie Evans were really a good team. I never forget, Mark would come in and he'd lay it down in the beginning. He's like, the first season, we played and we won, I think we won a bunch of games in a row. And then he kind of we lost a game. We were really bummed out. He's like, hey guys, we weren't going to win every game, but just don't get that mindset. You guys are going to be good. Just don't get to that. So you think you're going to go undefeated, but some of the guys were like, I think we could have, but Mark was a real good coach. He understood, I used to love it. Mark used to get in the drills. He was still in the drills. He'd be sweating and he'd be riding the bike after practice, and he'd have his referee shin guards on. And man, he would give her, man. He was always, playing 3-on-3 after practice. And he was always in the middle of practice where Donnie was really, he was a real X's and O's coach. And it's, I always say this, the goal that Blaine Fitzpatrick scored, I'll never forget the championship winning goal. Donnie said to Fitzy, here's what's going to happen on the power play. They're going to move it down to the wall, move it down to the corner to Christie. You need to get into this little position just right above the circle, right above the dot. And it's going to be wide open. And sure enough, down the wall to the corner, Christie one times it to Fitzy, and Fitzy's all alone, and rest is history, right? So there's your goal. Donnie was just such a good video coach and a good guy that just understood the game. And then with Smurf, it was, he went from a player to being a coach. And it was, I think the first couple of years were difficult to kind of break that, get into that coach player mindset. But, he learned a lot from Donnie. He really did. And a lot of the stuff he carried over was from Donnie.
There's, you talk about the coaches, and every coach obviously tries to implement their own style. You've experienced that now, I'm sure, as a coach for junior hockey and youth hockey. And there's a quote that I have a few years ago, actually, when you were talking with Cleve for a Peoria Journal Star piece, where you're talking about Don Granado, and you say, I consider myself a player's coach, much like Don Granado was with the Rivermen in our title year. So a player coach, and that's what you want to be. Can you explain, how would you describe what is a player coach, a player's coach?
I think as a player's coach is a guy that's approachable. Not a guy that there's so many coaches that, once the door closes, I don't want to talk to you. If you have an issue, whether it's personal, whether it's on the ice, you can always want to be able to coach you can approach. There's something going on in your life. I mean, right now, my job as a coach is to get players to college, right? I consider myself as a player, as a coach that gets guys to college. Donnie was a guy who I think whether you had a hockey question, whether it's a personal question, he would listen and he would help you out with it. And he was always there, and he always told you the truth. I never once walked out of Donnie Granado's office wondering if he was telling me the truth. I've walked out of a couple of offices wondering if that was the truth. But I'll never forget this line. I use it now. I still tell my players this. I'll never forget it. We made a trade at the trade deadline, and I was on the power play before, and I got taken off the power play, and I was a little bit didn't understand why. Didn't really get the exception. So after the game, Donnie called me in his office, and he said, "Hodge," he said, "you cannot control what I do." And I was like, and he pointed to the door. And I got up and I walked away. And I was like, okay, I can respect that because I respected him as a coach. But I remember him saying, I tell the players, you can't control what the coach does. You can control what you do. And I knew that. And I'm like, okay, I get it. And it was kind of that was a refreshing statement to hear from a guy that you respected.
He had a knack for getting in your heads collectively too. I mean, he could really motivate. I remember him telling me about, trying to remember, I think it was a February of that championship year. You guys were down south and went into a little, the team wasn't necessarily playing well. And he always says he went into the locker room and told you guys that things didn't have to be perfect to get the result you wanted at the end. It told you, decide now what you're going to want to be. Did that just, obviously it resonated with you guys? Do you remember that conversation with the team at all? Or?
Yeah, I do. I remember that trip, but we were I think we went 6-4, and that was a 10-day road trip. I think we went like 6-4. Were you on that trip with us?
I watched the entire Sopranos series twice.
Yeah. But again, it was, I mean, I think it was one of those things like, guys, you don't have to be, again, same thing that Mark said. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to execute what we want to do as a team and be a team. And I think that was everybody kind of at that point were like, yeah, okay. You know, we get it. We understand what he's trying to say. And we had such good leadership in that team. I mean, look at the guys he walked in with. I mean, I think he saw, going back from the beginning, the holdovers from Reader's deal was me, Maloney, Rybar, Fitzpatrick were the four guys I believe that were still on that team. I think we said I take pride in the fact that I believe that being Maloney and I were the two guys that were still there, we were a real part of the foundation of the Rivermen way, right? They call it the Patriot way. Let's call it the Rivermen way. I really feel like we were down at that ground level of that when players came in, they just kind of bought into that system. I believe that the success that organization has had started with Bruce Sowers, number one. I love Bruce Sowers, first of all. I know I'm going off on a tangent. No, but I'll never forget, Bruce Sowers used to come into the locker room after every game, win or lose, and he would shake everybody's hand after you won. Great job. Congratulations. After you lost, you just hear go get them tomorrow night, boys. Get them next game. But he made it like it wasn't just a signature on a paycheck. There was a face. There was a man behind the check. And I never forget that as long as I live. He was one of the most respected hockey men that I've ever been around. I as an owner, I try to emulate a lot of the stuff that I learned from him. And I mean, his sons, Tim and Scott and Mike, you know, they're just great people to be around. And it was just that whole Rivermen organization built on the Sowers and Ann Griffith and their foundation, what they laid those years was it's amazing to think of where it was when it left the American League and Bruce bringing it back. Right. I mean, look at Bart Rogers. Bart Rogers, when I got there, Bart was an intern, right? At the talk about a success story, right? We talk about player successes. What about Bart being an intern in the merchandise store? Now he's one of the owners. I mean, it's like, wow, like what a success story. But talk about a guy who bought into what Bruce Sowers was. You know, Bruce Sowers, you know, helped him out, brought him along, and showed him the ropes. And Bart's been successful ever since. So I mean, it's just, you know, I forgot where I was going with that, but you know, just one of those things where, you know, the success is just inbred right when you walk in the door. I mean, you know, I remember the first day of walking in, you see that picture of Darren Veach painted on the wall on the old staircase, right? And that second year, I think it was an NHL lockout. We got to skate with Tomlinson and Hoover, those guys all came back to skate with us, and it's like, this is what it's about. This is what a tradition is about in Peoria. And just that kind of really resonated to me as a player. And I'm sure Muggsy too. You know, Muggsy was one of the best captains I think I've ever played with or had been associated with. One of the best people I've ever been associated with, you know, just as a player and a human being. Like, he was one of the greatest guys ever to be around. So we actually saw each other a couple of years ago. He came into Boston to see the Blue Jays play the Red Sox, he and his wife and his 2 kids. And we got to have lunch, and we got to tell some funny stories and laugh, and just like we were back in the locker room, you know. So it was just a great time. And as you can tell, I really hate talking about it.
All the alumni that we've talked with, though, that have had an opportunity to talk with Mr. Sowers and see Bruce in the locker room downstairs say pretty much the exact same thing you are. There's nothing but positive stories about this man. When you came to the team, it was 96, 97. Of course, the Kelly Cup happens in the 2000. Do you remember, as it's looked back on, I think, honestly, we're coming up on 40 years of professional hockey in Peoria. The team won 2 Turner Cups in the IHL, but I think the 2000 Kelly Cup, you know, without question, is one of, if not the most popular team in Rivermen history. But for the trophy celebration, you can see that online. You can hear people talk about that day, that series, those playoffs, being down 2-0 in the Kelly Cup finals. But what about before then, Dan? What do you remember just that season, given that you were, as you said, you know, you and Maloney, a couple of really the only vets there that had been there for a couple of years? Was there a special, I mean, I don't know if this is generic to say, but was there a special feeling maybe that season going into 1999 that maybe did feel a little different than years prior?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you hit it on the head. There was a special feeling that year in training camp, and kind of watching us kind of put the pieces together as we went along. You know, you had Jason Delerme joined us, wasn't there in the beginning, and then Cam Severson came in. I think the biggest acquisition we made that year was Aaron Bowe. Like, Aaron Bowe at the trade deadline. I mean, talk about a player, a talented human being, just a juggernaut of a person. Like, I was lucky. I got to be his partner. Like, we still talk today, and we still call each other partner. Like, talk about a guy who's talented, amazing human being, talented on and off the ice. He shows up with his records, and we used to go to the bar after the game, and he'd be up there on the turntable spinning his records, you know. But I really think that was the key moment that really put us into that playoff position. Adding a guy like Aaron to our locker room and our roster just took us to the next level, especially on the back end. Because, I mean, you look at, you had Maloney and Golden, you had myself and Bo, you had Tremblay and Smith, and you had Craig Anderson. Craig Anderson, who played at University of Wisconsin, was our 7th defenseman. I mean, my Lord, look at how stacked were we back on the back end, you know? But, you know, with Dirksen and Ned and, you know, just all those guys up front. But I think watching the pieces come together as we were going along in the season, and then seeing how Donnie just really molded all the egos and all the personalities, just, it was awesome to see when you look back at it and just see that how we were able to kind of put that all together. But the feeling was there in the beginning, and I think we knew that there was something special happening. And, you know, and you drop the first two, and you're like, oh boy, I got to go down to Louisiana. But, you know, Donnie said after the second game, he's like, hey, we're going to score goals in Louisiana. You know, we're going to score goals, you know, and, you know, you look at Game 3, right? Stan Melanson throws Jason Delerme into their net and hurts their goalie. Their goalie, Mike Valley, is on a tear. We can barely beat him. And their defenseman goes around and clears out Jason Delerme, throws him. Jason Delerme's what, 5'8", 5'9", 125 pounds, wherever he was, went flying and runs into Valley and dislocates his elbow. And just that kind of was I think that was a turning point in the series. Was, you know, then they put Arsenault in, and we were able to win 3 straight, you know, and we won 3 straight. And then Valley came back in the last game, and, you know, we were able to do enough to win. So, but yeah, it was one of those special seasons that you don't really forget as you're kind of you look back fondly on.
It was such a storybook season, and those 3 games down there, walking into a place where they were on a 22-game home win streak and
Yeah.
printing their parade route in the newspaper, and of course the conversation you had up in Peoria with fans and team management from Louisiana saying we'll take merchandise for you. All those things. And I want you to talk about some of that, but first, 96-97 team, Peoria's first year in the league, and again down there against Louisiana in the semifinals. I thought that team could have easily won the whole thing as well. I mean, that team was as good as the one that did win it. And of course, you got in that overtime game there. I could still see that.
Trevor Hannes' butt hit him in the rear end. I mean, that team was fantastic. What a great group of guys. Paul Vincent Jr., you got John Pratt, Doug Evans, Hillebrand and Bonner and Ned and just Maloney, myself and just it was a great Jeff Kungle. I mean, it's amazing what a group of guys we had on that team. That I really think that had we won that series, we would have beaten South Carolina. I believe that
absolutely.
In my heart.
You had a power play in overtime.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
With 10 shots on goal. I can remember you at the point
one time in it
over and over and over and over.
Dougie Evans would just lay it over to me, and I just crank it. And then one time, I'll never forget, I still see it in my eye, going in the net, and Hanner went across the net, hit him right in the cheek. I'm like, oh, it couldn't have gone that way. It went that way. But, then they blocked a shot, and they went on a breakaway. It's like, oh, just kind of, but you know what, though? We got down in that series. We never should have been down. We should have taken care of our business at home. And, those were 5-game series that back then, I believe, right? Yeah. So it was best of 5. So we dropped the first 2, we won that one down there. And then, then over that double overtime, whatever game that was just, it was tough, but we learned from it. I thought we learned a lot. I learned a lot from it as a player, but it's funny because the year that we won it, we had actually gone down to Louisiana to play that game down there, and that was a really odd game. I never forget that. That was the most nervous I've been for a game. Just like, wow, the ghosts are coming back in a way. But I think it was good for us to be there to get that game out of the way. We lost that game, but we got that game out of the way, and I think that gave us confidence going into the finals. And when we were going down there, and for those 3 games, knowing that we could win in that building if we played hard, and I think we did. We played real well.
Yeah.
Somebody I think both of you will appreciate is Norm Ulrich, who played a part in that too. Obviously in 2000, I'll tell you what, watching, and obviously I can appreciate it being that, he's a broadcaster. That's my role. Honestly, even watching the highlights of that Kelly Cup win and the OT goal and hearing him, it gives me goosebumps watching it. I know you had went fishing with Norm a number of times. Jim Small, who you'd mentioned earlier, may have been along for some of those trips. Dan, what was your relationship like with Norm Ulrich?
It was awesome. Norm was a great guy, and I love Norm to death. And I just never forget, I'd go fishing with those two. He would just be – because Jim Small would always drive the boat, and he'd be like, oh, Small, you're always putting yourself in position to catch fish. You never put me in the position to catch fish. Blah, blah, blah. Just the two of them going back and forth. But such a special human being. I mean, just a great guy. I mean, you never had to know – you never wonder where Norm stood. Like, he would get mad when guys would walk off the bus with their hats on backward. What is that? He was such an old school guy, and just insulted there. Talk about a guy that was every time, like you said, Andrew, every time you hear that, and Peoria wins the Kelly Cup. I mean, it's one of the greatest. It's like, like Dan Kelly and calling the Bobby Orr goal and obviously, different eras, but just hearing that is it's just one of those iconic calls, I think, in hockey lore, especially in Peoria hockey lore, where the voice he had such a distinct voice. And I'll never forget, he would always do those interviews on that tape recorder. He never wanted to get to that MP3 player, always on that tape recorder. I'd click and it would start going, and he would stick with it, man. He would stick with it. So, I mean, Dave,
20 years old. He had that thing for 20 years.
That's unbelievable. That thing should be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. That was awesome. I used to love that little microphone. But he was one of the most special people that I encountered down there, for sure.
Yeah, it's just and that's a big part of what the Rivermen are. Mm-hmm. Their history. So many different characters over the history of that team, 40 years of it now. And it's just, I imagine for you to have been a part of that just kind of takes you aback a little bit. When you think about the characters and the moments in that organization, who do you think about?
I mean, for me, I think about all the players that came through for the 6 years I've been there. I mean, look at John Gee. John Gee started there he was in Chicago, I believe, or San Antonio, and he came to us that first year. And it's a funny story. He always laughs about his teeth. Paul Vincent Jr. actually tipped that puck that hit John Gee in the teeth. Yeah. And you know what, though? Tell you what, now we're in Columbus. John Gee played that night. That tells you how tough of a son of a gun he is. He got 2 front teeth knocked out, went to the dentist, played that night. That's the kind of guy that's behind the bench in Peoria right now. Just such an awesome – he was such an awesome player and such an awesome human being. But, there's so many other players, like Justin Kral and I mean, remember Kenny Boone would go down and he'd fight anybody in the building, and Dougie Evans, and there's so many players. But, obviously, Darren Maloney, was my teammate for 5 years. He was always the constant. He and I were there, and a great guy like Joe Rybar. Joe Rybar was he was probably one of the funniest human beings. And he could eat I'd never seen a guy eat as much as skinny as he was. He could put it away, and a guy that I believe should be in the Hall of Fame is Blaine Fitzpatrick. Like, Blaine Fitzpatrick scored one of the most iconic goals in Rivermen history, and he's one of my favorites. Here's a guy who got his face cut open in that series or the playoffs that year, and came back and you could see the meat hanging off his cheek. Got stitched up and was it was there the next day, ready to skate again. But he's a guy that I think is one of the guys that exemplified what Rivermen hockey is all about. A guy like Trevor Baker. Look at Bakes. I mean, talk about a skinny rail but tough as nails. Brad Essex. I remember Brad Essex he would get in fights. He had hands like cinder blocks. He would never had a bruise on him. But again, like a guy like Bakes and players of that era were just awesome. Again, I was lucky enough. I was able to skate with Hoover and Tomlinson and those guys, and kind of see the IHL to the ECHL kind of transition. But again, you see those guys want to come back, and in Darren Veach, of course, who golfer, hockey player, just an all-around all-star. So I know it's a lot of names, but just a lot of people that I always looked up to. When you look across the room and you can see guys that you respect. And that was one of the things, like, what was one of the best things about our locker room is, of the 6 years, we just, every time we went in the locker room, you look around the locker room, we respected every guy. Every guy had the respect of each other, and we all just played for each other. And that's a mark of a good team.
Dan, one more thing I'd like to ask you about the Hall of Fame induction night. You're standing down there. It's an emotional night, and you're holding the plaque, and you got a jersey, and somewhere in your mind you're thinking, I'm going to go to center ice and kiss that logo. How did all that play out in your head? What were you thinking?
It was such an emotional night that I forgot I had 3 kids. I said, oh my gosh, I feel so terrible. But to my defense, though, that day we had gone to lunch with Connie Griffith and Laura, Connie Duncan and Laura Griffith, and the kids would have gladly gone with them that day. But during that time, going back, I'm like, I never really got my chance to kind of say goodbye to Peoria and kind of do it the way I wanted to do it. So I said, if I get the opportunity, I definitely want to do something special. And, I'm like, I felt like it was the right way to kind of say goodbye. And I said, if I ever get myself back in that building again, that I would do it. And I just felt right. And I think Ainge Wayne was, where you going? And I'm like, I'll be right back. He was still in the middle of talking, but I felt like it was the right thing to do, and just says, hey, thank you to the Rivermen organization and all the fans and all the people that were there to support us for all those years. And it was a lot of special time on that ice, a lot of special moments. So I wanted to, kind of say goodbye in my own way.
Perfect. Thanks, Danny.
You're welcome.
Dan, I think we, as we talked about a little bit when we were off the air. I think we could go another hour. So who knows, there may be a future conversation down the road with you. We've loved hearing you go down memory lane, sharing some of your stories here on Rivermen Day. It's a celebration of hockey in Peoria over all these decades, and you're a pivotal part of that history. So thank you so much for joining us, Dan Hodge, again, 2017 Rivermen Hall of Famer, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
I greatly appreciate it. Thank you much, and good to see you, Cleve. I love you, brother.
And the hat with the
bill on it. And the hat. Lozzie's going to get it. Lawmaster's going to get it one of these days.
That's it. See ya.
All right, guys. I'll talk to you later. Thank you.